Parallel lines and transversals. This is the vocabulary. I apologize ahead of time. This is going to be longer. However, it is incredibly important that you take notes on these vocabulary words and you have them to reference back to. So please take your time, listen, write down any questions you may have. I will happily answer them, and make sure you are writing down the vocabulary. So angles, okay? An angle is formed by two rays with a common endpoint. The common endpoint is called the vertex. Okay, so here is a vertex. This right here is a ray, this right here is a ray, and this is another ray. The rays are called sides. The symbol for an angle is this little guy. It kind of looks like a slanted L. Angles are typically named using 3 letters. The middle letter must always represent the vertex. Angles can also be named using just the vertex if it is the only angle located at that vertex. And angle measures. So when referring to the measure of an angle, you use the lowercase letter m. An example of that would be like the measure of angle ABC right here. So that's an example of what we have here, is 60 degrees. That is an example of something you are going to see. So different types of angles. You have acute angle. An acute angle is going to go ahead and be less than 90 degrees. Okay, so go ahead and write that out. You have, so acute, you have a right angle, and that is denoted right here with a little box in the corner. That says it's a 90-degree angle, that little box. And that is equal to 90 degrees. Okay, so a right angle is always going to be 90. You have an obtuse angle. An obtuse angle is going to measure more than 90 degrees. And then you have a straight angle or a straight line. And the measurement of a straight line is always going to be 180 degrees. Now we have different types of angles. So we have vertical angles. And vertical angles are 2 angles that are across of each other when 2 lines intersect. These angles are congruent. So, example here would be angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Or angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. So let's go ahead. So angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So a few vocabulary words we're going to write off to the side too. So congruent looks like this. Okay, that is a symbol. And it means equal. It's going to have the same measurement. So we can move on now to adjacent. So adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex. And remember, vertex is like the point of the triangle. And they will share a common side. They are next to each other. So, example here, the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 equals the measure of angle A, B, C. So, let's make this here. This is their common side. Okay, here is the common vertex. And this angle, measure 5, is adjacent to measure 6. So adjacent means next to, touching. They share a same side. Okay, they both share this line right here. We also have complementary angles. So complementary angles are any two angles in which the sum, so when I add them up, of their measurements is 90 degrees. So the measure of angle 7 plus the measure of angle 8 equals 90 degrees. You can see that right here. See, measure of angle 7 is here, the measure of angle 8. But notice how they gave me a little square box right here, okay? That tells me those two are going to be complementary. So complementary, 90 degrees. Remember that. So complementary. $90. Now we also have something called supplementary. So supplementary angles are any two angles in which the sum of their measurements is 180 degrees. Looking at the picture we have here, the measure of angle 9 plus the measure of angle 10 equals 180 degrees. I can tell that by looking at it too, because this is a straight line. A straight line measurement is 180. So that means all the way from here to here, it's 180 degrees. Well, measure of angle 9 plus measure of angle 10 equals a straight line that is 180. So this one plus that one are supplementary. So another thing to remember is supplementary equals 180 degrees. Remember those words. Very important words. You will hear them. Something else I want to point out, that complementary and supplementary angles do not have to be adjacent. So these angles might not share a same side. They might not even touch, okay? But they can be. So if two different angles are complementary, that means those angles, when I add them together, equal 90 degrees. If two different angles, or maybe three different angles, are supplementary, okay, that tells me when I add them all up, if I hear the word supplementary, that is 180 degrees. Okay, now I have parallel lines and transversals. So here's an example. Parallel lines are like line L and line M. They're going to go on and on forever, and they're never going to touch. Okay, they're going to stay equal distance apart the whole way. That's parallel lines. So parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. are called parallel lines. The arrows on the lines indicate that they are parallel. So these little lines right here, notice how they both have the same little markings? That means those two are parallel. The symbol for parallel lines is this, two lines up and down. A line that intersects two or more lines is called a transversal. So right here, this line, line T on our example, is the transversal. Okay, this guy right here, he intersects, so he crosses those parallel lines. In the diagram, to the left, L is parallel to M, so line L is parallel to M, and the transversal is T. Also on here, I want to point out that if I'm looking at this diagram over to the left, this is going to be the inner or the inside of the area. Okay, and then these would be outside. Okay, when we are looking at parallel lines. So inside is talking about in between the lines. So this is also inside over here. And then outside. So that'll make more sense on the next slide. I just want to point those terms out. Okay, corresponding angles. So corresponding angles is where we're at. Are in the same position on the parallel lines in relationship to the transversal. These angles are always congruent. So see. Okay, so we said they're congruent, so they're going to be the same measurement. So angle 1 is corresponding to angle 5. Angle 2 is congruent and corresponding angle to angle 6. So right here, notice how they look the same and they are just on a different line. Same also, but I'm not going to highlight it. Angle 4 is going to be corresponding to angle 8. Angle 7 is going to be corresponding to angle 3. They have the same measurements because they are on parallel lines and they're cut on a transversal. We also have alternate interior angles. So these ones are on the inside. So remember how I pointed out inside on the last slide? Okay, alternate interior angles are going to be on the inside. They are the inside of parallel lines on the opposite sides of the transversal. And they are always going to be congruent. So an example is going to be like angle 4 is going to be congruent to angle 6. So let's see, angle 4 right here is going to be congruent to angle 6. These have the same measurements. Also, angle 3 is going to be congruent to angle 5. So again, 3 and 5 are alternate interior angles. So they are on the alternate sides, and they are inside the parallel lines. So that's the interior. So alternate interior angles. They are going to be congruent. They are going to have the same measurements. Then I have alternate exterior angles. So alternate exterior angles are going to be on the outside of the parallel line, so exterior, outside, and they are on the opposite sides of the transversal. These are also always going to be congruent. So an example of this would be angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. They're going to have the same measurements. Also, angle 2 is congruent to angle 8. So angle 2 is the same measurement as angle 8. So they are on alternate sides. They're on the exterior of the lines. So alternate exterior angles are congruent. And last but not least, we have consecutive interior angles. So let's look at our words and see what we have here. Consecutive means like one after another. So they are going to be on the same side of the transversal and inside, okay, because I had the word interior. And these are always going to be supplementary. So remember, supplementary means equals 180 degrees. So some examples of this is going to be the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 6 equals 180 degrees. So 3 plus 6, okay, because it's consecutive, so it means they're next to each other, right? Right here, they're next to each other. Interior, they're on the inside of the lines, are supplementary. So if I take this angle and I take this angle and I add up the measurement of both of them, they will equal 180 degrees. Also, the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180 degrees. So if I take the measure of angle 4, I add it to the measure of angle 5, those also both equal 180 degrees.